Chapter 18. Keep moving, Ember growled the words through her fangs as she forged through the darkness of the mountainside and into the vast valley of Ascalon below. If one of those patrols catches sight of us, we're finished. The moon was filled out now, and even behind its shroud of pallid clouds, its light made travel easy. The Char led the way through the shattered landscape, and Dougal chased right after her, with Riona nipping at his heels. Colleen came next, moving her shorter legs faster just so she could keep up. In the rear, Golok had given up trying to hustle the even shorter Cranks along, and had scooped up the Azura and set him to ride on the Norn's broad shoulders. Wolf's teeth, said Golok, a little too loud. We should turn this hunt around and kill them all instead. Shush, Riona said. They can find us as easily by sound as sight. Bring them on, Golok said, louder than ever. I will bathe in their blood. Cranks rapped the Norn in the ear. This is simple math, Cranks said. There are 6 of us. Each warband has up to 20 members. Ember, how many warbands are there in southern Ascalon? The Char answered without looking back. The Iron Legion has centered here since being charged with the siege of Ebonhawk. They and the Blood Legion both have responsibility for the patrols. Count in some Ash Legion detachments as scouts. Probably hundreds of warbands roam this region. Right, that makes for thousands of Char wandering these lands. What happens when one of them finds us? And they say that the Azura are as smart as Raven. Golok laughed. We kill them, of course. I'm sure we will. But what will they do first? Asked Cranks. Quiver before our might. And quake too. Frustrated, Crank spoke slowly, enunciating each word. They'll make noise. They'll sound the alarm. They'll bring more of their kind. Raven's eye. I do believe you're right. Golok tried to keep a straight face. So, Crank said, ignoring the word's bemused expression. Discretion is the better part of battle. Valor, corrected the Azura. And why might that be? Cranks grabbed his head with his hands and nearly fell off of Golok's shoulders. It means that it's better to understand what you're up against before you get into a fight. It involves gathering intelligence, thinking broadly, and figuring the odds. Fine, friend Cranks. Golok twisted his neck to grin up in the Azura's direction. I shall permit you to do the figuring and tell me when a battle is too odd. Cranks clapped his hand over his mouth to keep from cursing. Dougal chuckled as he strove to keep up with Ember. The Char was as fast and as nimble as a mountain cat, and she had a longer gait, so keeping pace with her even in the darkness took some sweat. The ground was fairly open, dotted by small crops of trees and the foundations of ancient habitations. Occasionally there would be a weathered crater, a remnant of a centuries-old battle between the humans and the Char. Sometimes the center of the crater was empty, and sometimes the water that had gathered in the hollow winked like a crystal in the wan light. The grass reached up to Dougal's calves, and in the daytime probably sported a host of wildflower blossoms. They kept to the moonlit sides of the hills, risking detection to keep from spilling into unseen pitfalls and gullies. The 6 moved silently through the dusk and into the night, now not speaking unless necessary. The blue-white shades of the shrouded moon were only interrupted by the towers of flame erupting from the distant Char camps. These lit the undersides of the clouds, and the reflection of that light washed everything in a faint, fiery orange. Sometime after midnight, Ember signaled for a halt. The others froze and then followed her to hunker down in the shadows of a skeletal Char war wagon, its frame long since scavenged for parts and left rusting in the moonlight. Silently, she pointed towards a torch that she had seen burning in the night. As they remained hidden, it wound closer. Dougal glanced over to see Golok fingering his axe, ready to leap into action at the slightest hint that they had been spotted. Colleen put her hand on the Norn's wrist, which looked like a child reaching out to hold her father's hand, and he stopped. As the torch drew closer, Dougal heard a number of Char voices growling and snarling at each other. The voices grew louder for a while and then tapered off as the torchlight faded in the distance, and then it seemed safe. Dougal tapped Ember on the elbow, and she nodded and stood up. They spoke in whispers. That was a patrol from the Iron Legion, she said. Were they looking for us? Asked Dougal. Ember shook her head. No, not yet. Dougal had to agree. There was no tension among the Iron Legion Char. They moved like night watchmen making their regular rounds, neither expecting trouble nor encountering any. They waited another 10 minutes before Ember gave the signal to head out. As a gray dawn threatened to break over the mountains far to the east, Ember steered them to higher ground and found a cave for them to hide in. Wolf's haunches. I do not care for burrowing into a dredge hole, Golok said. Riona nodded. If a patrol finds us here, we'll have no place to run. This is Ascalon, said Ember. We Char own every bit of it, but the place we came from and the place we're going to. There are no places for us to run. At least it'll be cool, said Cranks. My next research project must include methods for capturing this incredible heat that the Norn give off when exerting themselves. And the cave mouth faces south, so I can see the sun, Colleen said with a smile. And there's a great view, said Dougal. He gazed back over where they had been, far to the south. He could still see peaks peaks of the mountains in which Evanhawk nestled. The mountains had given way to gentler foothills, like the one that they were holding up in now. Once there had been forests here, but the war had ravaged the earth, and now verdant grasses had covered these rolling lands. Dougal had not come this way out to Ascalon City the first time around. 5 years earlier, he and his friends had crossed through the Shiver Peaks instead, but he had studied maps of Ascalon for much of his life. On the other side of the hill, he knew the land would become even easier until he and the others would find themselves racing across wide open plains. Then they would be at the most vulnerable, with few places to hide, but if they stuck to moving at night, he thought they might be able to manage it. Get as much rest as you can, said Ember. We will move out at noon. What? Why? Asked Dougal. Before he could say more, Gullet cut him off with a tremendous snore that echoed through the cave. Riona nodded and spoke up, to be heard over the rumbling. I thought you said that traveling during the day would be dangerous. Yes, but we are close to the Dragon Brand, Ember said. We would be better off not attempting to cross it at night. Riona caught Dougal's eye and signaled that she would take the first shift today, along with Ember. He was too tired to realize that there wouldn't be a second, and he had leaned against the back of the cave and tried to ignore the Norn snoring. The time passed so fast that when Dougal woke up, he felt as if he had not slept at all. He felt a hand covering his mouth, and his eyes flew wide open to see Riona hunched before him, a finger pressed to her lips. After Dougal nodded that he understood, Riona removed her hand from his face, and he sat up. She stood up and beckoned him to follow her. They crept past Ember, who watched them silently with her large eyes, then rose to follow them. Riona led Dougal to the mouth of the cave, where she knelt down and pointed at a pair of pale figures meandering up the hill in the light of the breaking dawn. Dougal rubbed the sleep from his eyes, squinted down at the figures, an old shepherd and his young apprentice. For a heartbeat, he wondered how such people could have possibly brought their flock this deep into Ascalon, and he even gazed around, looking for the sheep. Then he realized what the shepherds really were. Dougal signaled for Riona to follow him back into the cave. When they reached Ember, they spoke in whispers. They're ghosts, Dougal said. They must have been working in the fields around here when Adalburn brought down the foe fire. Riona rasped, and their spirits have been trapped here for over 2 centuries? Horrible. They seem harmless, said Ember. Dougal shook his head. Anything but. I run into a lot of ghosts in my line of work, but restless spirits have some sort of reason for hanging around a place. An unfinished task, a wrong that needs to be righted, and so on. They're often coherent, and you can hold a reasonable conversation with them. They can be obsessive or angry, but they're sane. Sane for ghosts, at least. And those two are not? Asked Riona. The spirits created by the foe fire are frozen in time. To them, it's still the day of the foe fire. Adalburn is still their king, and the Char are still threatening at the gates. Like in Evanhawk today, said Riona softly, but both Dougal and Ember ignored her. Dougal continued, when they run into somebody still alive, they see that person as Char, or at best, an ally of the Char. It doesn't matter who or what the person really is. It could be Queen Jenna herself or a Sylvari. To them, each person who invades their space is Char. The foe fire killed every human in the entire country, Ember said. The Sorcerer King's atrocity extended far beyond his city walls. Dougal nodded. It affected every bit of the nation except for Evanhawk. What should we do about them? Riona asked. Nothing, unless they come into the cave, Dougal said. We do not need to fight with them. That's too bad, Ember said. She moved back into the cave and picked up Bladebreaker's sword. The 2 humans followed her. You can't tell me you're going to hunt those ghosts down, Riona said, shocked. I don't need to, Ember said, pointing her snout over Dougal's shoulder. They're already here. As Dougal spun around, the 2 spirits entered the cave and froze there in its mouth. They looked much as Dougal supposed they had in their breathing days, but with every ounce of life drained out of them. They were pale reflections of their former selves, and they trailed wisps of pale bluish ectoplasm behind them, as if blasted by the wind only they could feel. It made them look as they were constantly burning, and the way their faces contorted with rage and pain only added to that impression. Char, the old shepherd's ghost said. He brought his crooked staff forward and unleashed an inhuman screech. Kill them! The young shepherd drew his sword at his hip and charged forward, matching the other ghost's cry in a horrible harmony that Dougal feared might make his ears bleed. The others in the cave awoke in an instant. None of them, including Dougal and Riona, could do a thing before Ember threw herself between the 2 ghosts and began slashing about, her blade and claws cutting clean through their spectral forms as if they were no more than mist. Ghost twin screeches rose higher and higher in pitch until Dougal felt his eyes starting to roll back in their socket. Ember's snarls and growls added to the cacophony. Ember yelped as the ghost's pale weapons passed through her, not breaking her skin, but harming her just the same. The ghost screamed as her claws and swords cut through them. Her strikes drew no blood, blood, but with every swipe, they dragged away more of the glowing ectoplasm that made up their ghostly figures, diminishing them more each time. Riona grabbed her own sword, but Dougal held the others back with a raised hand. If we try to help her, she'll wind up slashing us too, he said. To the others, he shouted, gather your things and get ready to move. When Cranks, Colleen, and Gulick hesitated, he turned towards them and barked, now! Ember spun around like a wolf, flailing all around her, and doing her best to ignore the pain when the ghost struck her back. Soon, the older ghost dissipated entirely. The younger ghost howled in the grip of his insane fury and redoubled his attack. With only a single foe now, Ember concentrated on taking the ghost apart. Dougal realized that if the shepherds had been living, Ember would have killed each of them several times over by now. As it was, the others were ready to leave by the time she managed to dispatch the second apparition. Dougal scooped up Ember's pack. Are you alright? He asked as she staggered over to him. I'll be fine, she said as she took her pack from him. It only hurts when I breathe. I think I have something in my pack to help, said Cranks, unlimbering his satchel. The chargist waved him away. Ghosts hurt the soul more than the flesh, though they are no less deadly. Well done, Gulick said. You made quick work of those spirits. I only wish I'd been allowed to destroy them myself. You'll get your chance if we don't get out of here fast, said Dougal. It is difficult to really kill a ghost. He pointed to the swirling gray mist still moving about the cave's entrance. They'll reform in a matter of minutes. Maybe less. Let's not be here when that happens, Crank said as he crawled onto the Norn's shoulders again. I'd love to be able to remain here and study them for a while, Colleen said. They probably used this cave as a resting place when they were tending their sheep. We have our mission to think of first, Riona said as she headed for the cave's mouth. Moving fast in the growing muddy dawn, Ember led the group around the cave's entrance to the crest of a hill. As they topped the hill, the sun cleared the horizon, and Dougal saw the dragon brand for the first time. He felt as if he had been stabbed. If the arrival of the ghost had disturbed him, witnessing the damage done to Ascalon shook him to the bone. While the hilltop they were on stood in sunshine, to the north a ribbon of storm stretched from one side of the sky to the other. Dougal thought he could see a bit of daylight peeking out on the far side of the storm, but to the north and the west, the darkness stretched out to the horizon. The storm seemed like a river that flowed from the north to the west. The thunderheads scuttling over it ignored the prevailing winds in the rest of the region and raced along the same path like logs being pulled downstream through a set of rapids. Lightning arced through the storm clouds, thunder rolled along the ribbon and out across the surrounding lands. Now that he saw this, Dougal knew that he heard that noise while he had been trying to sleep, but had simply chalked it off to Gulick's snoring. Rain fell in some patches in some sections of the wide ribbon, but not in others, and the lightning paid it no mind, zapping down from the sky wherever it liked. The terrain below the clouds disturbed Dougal the most. The land had turned entirely into sharp, angled crystals that appeared to glow with power, although Dougal could not tell if that light was simply reflecting from the sun or actually came from within. Bent and twisted amethyst trees stood by the side of frozen cobalt streams that rolled through the landscape, covered with scattered scrub brushes and patches of grass, all transformed into crystals, both fragile and sharp. Where the ground was bare, it was twisted upon itself in gray lava-like swirls and dotted with half-shattered bubbles that looked like hatched ebony eggs clustered at the base of the glittering trees. Lightning smashed down into one of those trees and it exploded into uncountable fragments of amethyst. The crystal shards tinked against the glassy landscape as they cascaded to the ground and shattered again and again until they formed a gray-violet dust that coated everything near where the tree had once been. Ember elbowed Dougal. I thought you had been here before. We came through the shiver peaks, he replied. In any case, that was before all this. Colleen goggled at the scene. How terrifying, she said softly, and yet starkly beautiful. When she saw the others staring at her, she said, a dragon did this? Yes, Crank said, once more perched atop Gulick's shoulders, and without any effort at all. Its name was Kralkatorek. The creature is such an aberration that this is what happened to the land. It simply flew over. It didn't even have to touch it. Bear, snow leopard, raven, and wolf, said Gulick. He spoke quietly as if his voice might invite more destruction. It's horrific, said Riona aghast. A crime against nature. Dougal nodded. This is why we're doing this, right? If we don't find a way to work together, we don't stand a chance against the creature that did this. Statistically, we don't have much of a chance no matter what we do, said Crank. When Riona scowled at him, he added, but uniting the people against the dragons would elevate us from no chance at all to very little chance instead. Without a word, Ember did one thing that every fiber of Dougal's body screamed at him not to do. She launched herself down the hill and towards that raw, crystal-packed wound in the world. A moment later, he found himself loping after her, along with the rest of the group. The path to the Dragon Brand was wide and easy, the smoothest going since the team had left Ebonhawk behind. The sun shone down on their head, and the grass around them swayed in a gentle wind like waves in the sea. It felt good to be out in the open air and sunshine again. Dougal glanced at Colleen. She had seemed a bit off after having to spend so much time in the darkness of the night and then in the shade of the cave. Now, though, she grinned from ear to ear, seeming one with the nature through which she passed. Looking at her, Dougal couldn't help but smile himself. It didn't take long to reach the Dragon Brand. It seemed as if the corrupted landscape sensed that they were coming and gathered itself closer to be able to entrap them faster. Or maybe it was just how Dougal tried to treasure his last few moments in the untouched land that made time slip by so fast. Ember came to a halt on the edge of the Dragon Brand. Just before she had reached the border of the purplish crystalline obscenity, the others fell into rank alongside her, each of them staring out across the twisted atrocity to wonder what horrors it might hide from them. Then, after drawing a deep breath, Ember stepped into the weird landscape, and the others followed. The glassy grass crunched to dust under their feet, and soon the shards of it became deep enough to cover their ankles. The air crackled with electricity that made Dougal's hair lift up. Although he could see no threats, he sensed danger from every angle. He drew his sword and saw the others ready their weapons too. "This is fascinating," said Colleen. "It's as if all these plants have been frozen in their state between life and death. Do you think they still grow?" "Not after we step on them," said Crank. "I wonder how this works," the Sylvari said. "It's so curious." She picked up a sapphire blossom from an amethyst bush and watched it slowly crumble in her hand. "Let's keep moving," said Dougal. "The sooner we're through this place, the better." "Bear's blood," said Gulick. "This is all very strange, but it can't be worse than Ascalon City itself, can it?" There was the distant, faint sound of an explosion, and something skipped up the ground in front of the Norn's feet. Once it had been a standing pool of water, but now cracks spiderwebbed from where the bullet had shattered it. Dougal spun around to see where the shot had been fired from, but Ember had already spotted the source. "There," she said, pointing back the way they had came. A Char warband stood on the edge of the Dragon Brand, 10 soldiers, all told, heavily armored and ready for battle. The warrior in front raised his rifle and sword, and the others echoed his call. "Run," Crank said, batting Gulick on the top of his head. The Norn laughed and pulled his axe. "If they've already seen us, my tiny friend, then the time for stealth is over." He hefted his weapon in response to the challenge. "Wolf's teeth, the time for battle has begun." "Hold it," Dougal said. He cast a wary eye over the warband. "They don't seem to be charging." The battle lust danced in Gulick's eyes. "Then we shall take the battle to them." Ember grabbed the Norn's elbow before he could stomp off to fight. If they meant to fight us, they would have attacked already. The other Char of the warband were scrambling with their rifles as well. "Ho ho!" The Norn beamed with pride. "They are wiser than they would seem to fear to engage us in battle." "I don't think it's us they're afraid of," said Riona. "They just don't want to come in here." "Maybe they know something we don't," Dougal said as he glanced around them. "There's another warband coming from the northeast," said Ember. "And it looks like one in the southwest," said Riona. "We need to keep moving," Dougal said. Another distant pop, another shot puffed the earth next to him. "Right now." The 3 warbands, all on the closer side of the tortured strip of land, now sounded horns to each other. Their message was clear. Without a word, Ember turned to the northwest and started off again. The others fell into step behind her, the Norn and his Azura passenger last. "By the wolf's whimper," Gulick growled. "Only cowards run from such a fight." "Don't think of it as running away from that fight," Crank said. "Think of it as running towards a bigger one." The Norn let out a deep chuckle. "I do enjoy your wisdom." "I still don't like it," Dougal said, keeping pace with Riona and Ember. "What could be in here that would be so terrifying to keep 3 warbands of Char from coming after us?" Riona smirked at this. "Let's hope we don't have to find out." The gunfire behind them intensified, but at this range, they were minimal target, and the worst it did was shatter some of the glass foliage near them. None of the shots came close to hitting anyone, but it didn't seem as if the Char were trying very hard. "Hold it," Dougal said. Ember skidded to a halt in the shattered purple grass, and the others following her did the same. "What is it?" Char said. Dougal shaded his eyes and gazed to the southwest. "There," he said. "They're not shooting at us anymore. Look." The 2 Char warbands at the southern edge of the brand had joined together and were busy unloading their rifles into a crystalline hill hunkered to their east. It was a larger target, Dougal noted, but it had no effect on them and their fight. "I hadn't seen anything this odd since I stumbled upon that Hylic fertility ritual," Gulick said. Dougal knew exactly then what was happening. He'd heard tales of minions created by the Elder Dragons to execute their will, and anyone who might trespass upon their lands. Here in the Dragon Brand, they stood squarely in the Crystal Dragon's territory. Its passage had scarred the land and claimed it as its own. It stood to reason the creatures that lived here would belong to the crystal dragon too. We need to get out of here right now, Dougal said, grabbing Ember's shoulder. She shrugged him off with a growl. We should get to the far side of that hill for cover. No, Dougal said. We need to head in the other direction as fast as possible. We can't go back to the south, said Riona. Those warbands will tear us to pieces. Lean put a hand up to Dougal's arm. What's wrong? She said. Dougal stabbed a finger in the direction of the hill, which had started to shudder. That. As they watched, the hill continued to quiver, as if shaken by an earthquake. Although the land that they had stood upon seemed as solid as ever, a terrible noise sprang up from the hill. It sounded like thousands of glass shattering at once, and then the hill raised its head and opened its eyes.